going to do today is we're going to create a game like Tap War. So you can see we can put in a player name, player 1, player 2, or you can leave it blank and the app will automatically assign a player name for you. And you can also choose different colors, which is kind of cool. So then when you're ready, you hit start and it'll basically run the game. And so player 1 will tap or player 2 will tap. And then the winner is the one who occupies 90% of the screen first. And you can see, thanks for playing Tap War, player 1 won, and then you can return to the menu. So that's the mechanics of today's game. So we're going to open up Xcode and create a new Xcode project. This, as always, is going to be an iOS app. Hit next, and we don't need core data, so that all can be left unchecked. It's going to be called Tap War, and I'm going to use SwiftUI. So hit next, and it's going to save it. I'm just going to save it to the desktop. Now, while that's creating all the files and loading, I thought I'd flag with you as well. I'm going to be using two fonts, so I'm going to use Game Time and Gamer. These can both be downloaded for free from DaFont or any other font website, which is pretty convenient. So the first thing to use those fonts, I'm going to create a new group, call them fonts, and I'm going to drag and drop these fonts into that folder. Now, when I create them, I actually need to add them to the targets, and hit finish, and you can double check if you select them that they have the target membership that we just added. Now, to use these fonts, I'm then going to go back up to our Tap War, the blue file, and I'm going to go to targets and then the info. I'm going to add fonts provided by application, and you can see it's there on the list, and it's going to automatically assign an array. And if I open it up, I'm then going to have one item. So I'm going to need two items because I've got two fonts. And I'm going to copy the whole font name, including the extension TTF, into our fonts provided by application. That's going to go in here. Paste. I'm just going to close this side window so you can see. And then I'm going to have to do the same for our other one, which is Gamer. Copy. And then fonts provided by application. And then I can paste it in here. That's as simple as it comes in order to use custom fonts. So to test that they're working, you can go to your content view, and I'm going to change this dot padding to it's using our Gamer font. So the next one I want to try is our Game Time demo. Game Time demo, and you can see if you haven't typed it right, it just uses a default font, and you can see that the Game Time demo is working as well. You can see there's no special characters available though. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to set up some of our data structures. So the first thing I'm going to need to record is the player 1 and player 2 name. So I'm going to go at state var, player 1 name is going to be blank, and I'm then going to do the same for player 2. And then I also am going to grab some red, green, blue values. So I'm going to go at state var p1, let's start with red, and I'm going to assign that to a double value, and it's going to be random. And I'm going to go from 0.0 to 1.0. Notice the three dots in the middle here, they indicate a range. So what I can then do is I can copy and paste that another couple times. So I can go player 1 red, green, and blue. And then I can do the same for all three of them for player 2. So I can go player 2 red, player 2 green, player 2 blue. When I hit resume, it should all work the same because we're not actually using any of these values yet. The last thing I'm going to do is set up when we show the game or not. Show game view, and it's going to be false to begin with. So that's all ready to go. Okay, so we've set up our variable, so now let's start setting up our view. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this hello world. I'm going to say, let's have and it's going to be Tap War, and for that I'm going to use Gamer, and I want my size to be a little bit smaller. Let's try for 30. So that looks pretty good. I'm also going to put that in a vertical stack because I can then stack all of my elements above each other. So let's have and then we're going to have text Tap War, and again this is going to have a font dot custom, and I'm going to use Game Time demo for this, and we're going to use, let's say, size 80 like we said before. That's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a form in, and it's going to contain all of the details about the players and stuff. So the first part is I'm going to have my section for player 1, player 1 even, and it should appear just here. There it is. Okay, so we're ready to start our player one. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a horizontal stack, and we're going to ask for the name. So I'm going to have a placeholder that says name, and then I want a text field, and we're going to say player one name, just if there is no value in it. And I'm going to go text is going to be the player one name. And remembering I'm using this $sign because I'm indicating that this player one name will update as the player enters their name in over here. So that looks pretty good. So our next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have another section for the color. And I'm going to have the text, choose a color. And what I might do as well is I'm going to put this in a horizontal stack because I want to put the text and then the color. And I'm going to use the color as a background on a piece of text. So I'm going to set width of 50 and height of 50, just so that we have a nice little field. And we're going to use the background, color red, P1 red. Green is going to be P1G, and then blue is going to be P1 blue. And then I'm also going to add some corner radius of, let's say, 10, just so it's rounded as well. Now you'll see we're using these values that we've indicated randomly, so this color is going to continue to change as the interface updates because it's always going to be a random color. But I'm going to want the player to be able to pick their color as well for a bit more personalization. So outside of this horizontal stack with this choose a color, I'm then going to add the color sliders. So the first one is going to be, so we're going to look for the red value first. So we're going to use the value of $P1R. So we're going to be able to change it as well. That's what the $sign means again. And we're going to give it a range of 0.0 to 1.0. So that slider is going to indicate how much red is in our chosen color. Now, the only thing, I suppose, the only problem with this view is that it's currently got a blue color. So let's change the accent, color to red. So, because that indicates it's red. And you can see now, and you can actually, if I press the play button, you'll be able to adjust how much red is in your color, which is pretty cool. What I'm going to do is basically copy that and paste it 3 times, but this time we want red, green, and blue. And then this one is going to be green accent. This one is going to be, well, technically, I'm going to force it to be a blue accent, so I, as a programmer, know what's going on, but technically it will be blue already. And so there's our colors, and so the user can then enter their name and choose a color, which is fantastic. Now the next thing I'm going to do is this whole section, I'm going to duplicate that from player 1 for player 2. So everywhere it says player 1, I'm going to change that to 2, and player 2 name gets saved. You can choose a color, and we're looking at player 2 red, player 2 green, and player 2 blue. And we're changing player 2 red, green, and blue with our sliders. And so you can see how quickly we can add like another section for player 2, and you can see the differences in colors. We've got our menu done. There's only a couple things left to do. The first thing, with this form, I'm going to collapse my form, and I'm going to add the font, the same as before. Font.custom. And I'm going to use the gamer font. And the size, let's go 25. And so that'll change everything in this form all at once, which is really cool. And then the last thing I'm going to have is a button that's going to start our game. And it's going to have the word start in nice capital letters. And again, I'm going to use my font, font.custom. And this is going to be game time demo. Size, let's go size 40, which is half of the title, size 80. So it should have like a nice blue start down the bottom. Blue because, whoops, custom. Blue because our button by default is blue. You can change the color if you want using the .foreground color. I'm going to leave it as is. Now the button, the action, what it's going to do, I'm going to first check if my player names have been entered, and if they haven't entered a player name, instead of leaving it blank, I'm just going to give it player 1, player 2. So if player 1 name is blank, then I'm going to, player 1 name is going to be equal to player 1. And I'm going to do the same thing for player 2. If it's blank, then change player 2 name to player 2. And then I'm going to start my game. Start game. And to do that, I'm going to push to my show game view. So it's going to be true. So now we're ready to go. The next step we're going to do is we're going to add a new view for our game. Go right click and go new file. Let's call this new file, let's call it, why not game view? It's going to be a SwiftUI view. And I'm going to call it game view. Now what I'm going to need to know to start this game is a couple different things. So I'm going to need to know the player 1 name and player 1 color, and then the player 2 name and player 2 color. So let's create some values that are passed in from the menu. So we're going to have player 1 name is going to be a string, player 2 name as a string, player 1 color as a color, and player 2 color as a color. Now these are variables, but they actually could be constants because we're not actually changing them at all after we start our game, after we push to this view. We're also going to have a player 1 score, score, which is going to start with 50% of the screen, and a player 2 score, which is also going to be 50%. They're going to start even. And the last thing I'm going to have is a threshold. And I'm going to set that to 90. Now you can set that higher or lower as you need, but I'm just going to leave it at 90 for now. Now I'm also going to unwrap, I suppose, return to the menu view once the game has finished. So I'm going to need a environment presentation mode. I'm going to call this presentation mode. And I'm going to have a show game overview as well. So what I'm going to do on my show game overview, I'm going to go back to the game view and then unwrap to the content view. So I'm going to drop 2 views. So I'm going to use this later. Going to use this presentation mode to return to the menu view. But I'm going to do that inside of our next view, which we haven't got yet, which is our game overview. Now I'm going to use the fix just this once to create a player 1 and a player 2. And just for now, I'm going to go color.red, and then this one's going to go color.blue, just so that we can use our preview here. Fantastic. So back in our content view, when we show game view true, that's going to do nothing at the moment, but what I want to do is I actually want a full screen cover. So I'm going to collapse my vertical stack in my body, and I'm going to add a dot full screen cover. And we're not actually using that one, we are using the is presented and content. So the is presented is going to be the show game view, and I'm going to change it as well, so I can unwrap it. And the content is actually going to be, see how I've put squiggly brackets in? That's going to be the game view, and it's going to need all of these values. So player 1 name is going to be from player 1 and from player 2 name. And I'm just passing the value in, I'm not changing them, and that's why it's not got a $sign there. Now player 1 color is going to be color, and it's going to be red, green, blue. And I'm going to use P1 red, P1 green, P1 blue. And then I can use this whole color thing again, copy and paste it in here. For player 2 color is going to be P2, 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 and I don't need that second bracket. And I'm going to force it to build, so that's going to hopefully get rid of that error for me. Fantastic, so we're setting our player names and we're passing into the content view. So now we're ready to set up our game view. Okay, so in our game view, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to need to know the size of the screen. That's going to be different for every device. So I'm going to need to use something that's called a geometry reader. So we're going to go geometry reader. And just for shorthand, let's go geo in. And then now we can refer to the size of the screen using this geo function. So I'm going to create a vertical stack. And I want spacing to be 0. And we want our button with an action. Oops. Now the button, when we tap on the first button, the player 1 button, so player 1 score is going to add 5, and player 2 score is going to take away 5. So we're going to move 10 points in total. And then we're going to have the text as well. And we're going to use player 1 name. And there's our player 1 button. And it's going to, every time you tap on it, it adds 5, so 55 to player 1 and 45 to player 2, and so on, so on. You can adjust how much these move, so you can make the player tap lots and lots if you wanted to. And then we're going to need a function a bit later on that's going to check if we're winning or not. Check win. I'm going to use that a bit later on, but I'm going to use it here as well. So when we tap on the button, it's going to change the scores and then check if we've won or not. Now this player 1 name looks a bit bland to begin with, so let's make it bold. Let's give it a rotation effect. And what we're going to do is we want to turn it upside down. And we want it to be 180. So that way it is upside down. Now I think I need to actually pass in degrees. 180 degrees. Looks better. So player 1 should appear upside down, hopefully. There it is, fantastic, because the device will sit on the table between the two people. The foreground color, let's make it primary, which is normally black, but if you're on dark mode, it's white or like a light gray. And then we're going to make it like half of the screen. So the width is going to be geo.size.width, so the full width of the screen. And the height is going to be geo.size.height, but I'm going to divide by 2. I only want half it. But I actually don't want half of it, and I don't need the alignment either. But I don't actually want half of it. I want it to be dictated by the player's score. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to multiply by the player 1 score, and then divide by 100.0, because that's the total. When we've got 50 and 50, and then we'll take 100. And so that will start looking like that. But then as we tap on that player 1 button, it's going to then expand it, because we're kind of occupying more of the screen. Now that's pretty cool. And then what we want to do is we kind of want the background color to be the player 1 color as well. Background color, player 1 color. Which, remember, we set in our preview just to be player 1 was... Oops, I don't even need that color because I'm using the color directly. And player 1 we set to red, so here is our red player 1. So that's pretty much done. So then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this whole button with its action, and we're going to do the same thing again, but this one is for player 2. So the player 2 doesn't need that rotation effect because it'll be upright. And we're going to use player 2 name, so there's player 2. Don't worry about this white down the bottom, that will actually work on this preview, on the simulator. It's just a preview thing. Background color is going to be primary. This time we're going to use the player 2 score to dictate the height of it, and we're going to use player 2 color. And you can kind of see how it updates as we go. So player 1, player 2. And then what we can do, we can hit play, and you can see player 1 will occupy more, and then player 2 is still taking away from player 2, so we've got to adjust our values. So player 2 will take away from player 1 and add to player 2. We'll try again. That looks better. And so now we've got our Tap War game. Now the last thing we've got to do is actually check for a win. If our player 1 score is more than our threshold, then player 1 wins. And then if that's the case, we're going to set a couple of values. So the first thing that we're going to need is our, I suppose, our winning values. So I'm going to, right at the top, I'm going to create a global variable, winning player name as a string, and it's going to be empty for now. And our winning player color is going to be a color, and it's just going to be red for now. Whoops, color.red. For now, and we can reassign that when we check for our wins. So if our player 1 wins, our winning player name, our global variable, is going to be player 1, and our winning player color is going to be player 1 color. And then I'm going to show my game overview. Show game overview is going to be true. Now, I'm going to do the same. I can't do an if else, so I'm going to do a copy paste and go if player 2 score is above the threshold, because there's an else where player 1 or player 2 is below the threshold, in which case we want to keep going. And this is going to be player 2 name, player 2 color, and then show game overview. And we can't find winning player name. Oh, because I haven't created them as variables. And then we should be fine. There we go. So that's all we've got to do to check our wins. So the last thing we've got to do is on this geometry reader, if I collapse the geometry reader, I'm then going to add a full screen cover just like before. But I'm going to need to know, I'm going to have to create my next view. So the is presented is easy enough. That's going to be our show game overview as a binding. And then the content, we're not sure what that is yet. So we're going to have some view. So I'm going to create a new file. And this is going to be called our game overview. And because we've got a global variable, we actually don't need much in this view. The only thing we're going to need is a binding from our game view, presentation mode, from game view, of type presentation mode, and we're going to need our environment, our presentation mode here too. Presentation mode, and the reason why is because then I can unwrap this view and I can unwrap the game view all the way back to the content view all in one hit. So that's pretty much done. I'm going to use my imagination, not the preview for this one, and that way I can now use our content game overview. And our presentation mode is going to be our presentation mode from here, this one here, as a binding, because we're going to change the value. So this is this view ready to go as well, our game view going. Presentation mode. Okay. So if I build, it should run. Fantastic. So next is our game overview. Okay, so the game overview is actually really straightforward. Where all we're going to do is we're going to create like a vertical stack with a few options in here. Vertical stack. Let's put a spacer in at the top. And actually, you know what? We won't even need a spacer. Actually, yeah, we'll use a spacer at the top and spacer at the bottom. Normally you wouldn't need to, but I'm going to space every element evenly. So I'm going to say text. Thanks for playing. And I'm going to use my font.custom, and I'm going to use gamer size 30. I'm going to use tap war, and I'm going to use the same font custom, but this time I'm going to use game time demo. Let's do size 80, like the menu was. And then I'm going to put a spacer in again. Let's go frame height 100. So this is going to like divide up the content a little bit. text winning player. And I'm going to use my custom font again. That can stay size 30 for gamer. And then we're going to have our winning player name. And this is going to be our game time demo. We can put that size 60 so the game, the winning player is a little bit more obvious, and we can even add the foreground color or change the text color to the winning player color. Personalizes it a little bit more. And then we can have another spacer with a height of 100, so I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. And technically, we don't need these two spaces. And then our last thing on this view is going to be a button, which has an action and some text. And the text is going to say return to menu, so that if another player wants to start playing, we can reset everything. And I'm going to use the font custom gamer. Size 30, that's fine. And then the action, what the button's going to do is it's going to go back all the way back to the content view. So I'm going to do first our presentation mode game overview. This one, .wrappedValue.dismiss, so that dismisses this current game overview. And then I'm going to go presentation mode game view .wrappedValue, wrappedValue.dismiss as well. So that's going to then dismiss the game view as well. So now let's run it and see what happens. Player 1 and now player 2. So we can leave these blank, remember, and it'll overwrite, and I can go like purple and green, and I can hit start, and then we can see player 1 and player 2, and you can see how it interacts. And then if player 2 wins, then it'll pass through to this view. Now the only thing I've noticed, all my fonts look really good and consistent except for in my actual game view. So in my game view, I'm going to have to change my font as well. So up here, we've got our, I'm going to open up my geometry reader, we have our text player 1, and I'm going to change the font.custom, and I'm going to use the gamer size, let's say, I don't know, 40, copy, and I'm going to do the same for my player 2 name. And that should hopefully update these values so that they look a little bit kind of more gamified. They look more like the games, they're more consistent. There we go, that looks better. And so let's build and run again. And I'm just going to use these two colors. This one's really washed out. And you can see now that looks better. And then again, if you win, player 2 wins, so that looks really good. And it unwraps twice.